Okie dokie. All right, everybody. We'll kick off because it's 12 o'clock. So thank you for joining us for our latest session of the Leadership Lab. This has really been designed to help you supercharge a range of skills during this time. I saw it as a real opportunity to be able to educate not only my existing client base, but also the general community when it comes to things like professional development, your leadership skills, communication skills. So we'll be running these every week or fortnight to give you some extra skills. We're very open to getting your feedback in terms of what you'd like to hear more of. So please feel free, if there's a topic or something you want to understand in more depth, send it through. Chances are it'll go to the top of the list. And I wanted just to share with you my company vision, which has always been empowering workplaces to ignite, inspire and nurture extraordinary leaders at all levels. And that whether we've been using PI or not, that's always been the foundation of the business. So hopefully through these sessions we can help allow you to ignite your leadership skills. So first things first, we are going to talk about what does good communication feel like. So I want you to go to menti.com. So open on your phone, just a Safari, some sort of browser, and at the top of that browser go to Menti, MENTI.com, and then once it loads it'll say what's the code that you want to put in, and the code you're going to put in is 371446, and then we're going to be able to see everybody's thoughts and questions. Clear, connectedness, trust. I think trust is a really good one. That's a huge foundational part of what good communication gives us. Transparent, easy, two-way. Often when we're communicating, sometimes it feels like we're just on the receiving end of it rather than two-way. Safe, awesome. Being heard. Understanding. We've got a few people saying transparency. Being heard. Open-minded, that's really good. Respectful. A lot of these things are around that feeling of safety, right? In terms of how do you feel that you've got a really safe, trusted relationship. Ongoing, honesty, direct. Yep. Who wants to share why they've written direct? That's a really interesting one. You can de-mic yourself, whoever it was, if you want to share. All right, we've got firm as well. I think that's, sometimes it can definitely feel that way. And maybe that's a good thing, right? It's like we know exactly where we stand. We've got total clarity. So I think ultimately what we're trying to achieve on the other end of building our communication skills is that we can provide this to people. We can be considerate, we can be transparent, authentic, we can build that connection. I think everything here, if you're to look up good communication, this is the feeling piece of it. How does it make the other person feel in that relationship? And ultimately, you can build your leadership skills through effective communication. Think about the best managers, leaders, perhaps you've ever worked for. They've had or made you feel this way. I'm going to ask you one more question. So this is really about how do you like to be communicated with? What's your preference? And these are a sliding scale. So you might rate them all really high, but you might rate something a little bit lower because it's not really a core preference for you. Lots of verbally. There's a big sliding scale for visually. Some people are like, nah, don't need a visual. And again, think about your whole, for those of you who've done your behavioral profile, think about your behavioral profile. When you think about that extroversion scale, were you really high on let's talk it out, let's communicate, let's verbalize it, I need to talk through my ideas, or am I a real thinker? Because thinking allows you probably to consolidate your thoughts before you verbalize. So potentially you might do a real mix of all these things. You might be that I need to write it down, I need to structure my thoughts, and then I want to go and have a conversation. And if that works for you, that's great. That's what you should leverage. Again, you need to be authentic. Somebody put the word authentic up there earlier. You need to be authentic to you as well in the way that you like to communicate. You've got to play to your strengths. We also find higher extroversion. So if you sat on the very and extremely high extrovert side of the scale in your profile, we do say that often they are more visually orientated. So chances are there's a big visual component of even how they like to visualize. They're the whiteboarders. Lee, I know you, you're a trainer and facilitator with the company that you're with. And I know I can even imagine you visually drawing things out. When I've sat with you, you're quite a visual person as well. So again, it's interesting how your profile can impact these things. So it's really good, interesting insights, I think. So we can start to see where people have scaled things. Lots of people, really, I think there's a big, strong preference around verbal. Let's talk it out. And a real range when it comes to writing things down. And again, a bit of a range on visually as well. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a food for thought, way for you to think about things. And we will go back to the wonderful PowerPoint. So I've broken it down into some steps when we think about communication. So steps first is listening. And that may seem like the most basic part of communication, but it's actually the biggest foundational skill you need to have when you're working through communication. And I haven't just said listening here, and you'll see a lot of information about the power of listening. I want you to think about how you can mindfully listen to the person that you're dealing with. And mindful listening is about shutting off that monkey brain that we all have that just is constantly thinking, right? That part of your brain that's always thinking and it's not present in the moment. So if you're in a meeting with someone, or you're on a phone call, or you're having an interaction with someone, I'd like you to think about, what am I thinking about? And it's really hard to do. But chances are you will find your brain distracting. Did I put a load of wash on? I wonder what's going on. I wonder if I've had anybody reply to that email. That's that part of your brain that's easily distracted. Mindful listening is almost like sort of meditating in that conversation and just listening, focusing on their thoughts, focusing on what they're saying, and also thinking about, how is this person feeling? Not just what are they saying, what's the emotion behind this conversation? Is there a level of frustration? Are they feeling tense? Are they annoyed? Are they happy? Are they excited, energized? What emotion is attached to what they're saying? Are they feeling a bit confused or disorientated? Do you need to help them with that and give them some clarity? So I'd encourage you to think about mindfully listening. And the biggest issue we have are these wonderful phones, right? And I see people do that, where it's that looking down, it's the glancing at your phone. They're an incredibly addictive thing, and I encourage you to just get the hell off them when you're having a conversation with someone. There's nothing worse than when you're on the phone and you're actually checking your emails whilst you're on a phone call, maybe on your headphones. I'll just check my Instagram feed. There is nothing worse than doing that. I'd encourage you, when we do leadership training, we get people to do these mindful listening activities where for 2 minutes, all you are allowed to do is listen to that person. You can't speak, you can't ask any more questions. Just for 2 minutes, it's just mindfully focusing on that person. And then we get the other person to do it. And then we get the other person to actually say, all right, I want you to feed back to the other person. What did they say, but how are they feeling? And we find this incredible height in activity with that person. They also retain more information, and they remember what was said and how they were feeling. And that also helps build trust. Second step, emotional awareness. And this sort of falls under the emotional intelligence category, is thinking about how that person is feeling. And for most of us, that can be challenging because we sometimes only think about 6 ranges of emotions. And I wanted to share with you this diagram. This is a really, it's a very big diagram, but hopefully you can start to see all the array of emotions that someone can feel. I found this about a month ago through a friend, and I just thought, wow, this is really powerful. We often do think about that middle range of emotions when it comes to, bad, fearful, angry, sad, happy, surprised, right? That they're the basic emotions. But then you can go deeper, and then you can go even deeper than that. And I'd encourage you, obviously we can share these slides with you, I can share this diagram with you, but really try and build that emotional intelligence and awareness and thoughtfulness. How are they feeling? What can you be doing to better understand their feeling? And I think, Peter's just written a comment which I thought is really relevant. He says here, discussing emotional state and responses can sometimes be challenging in a business context, which is absolutely spot on. Do you have tips for beginning this dialogue? Absolutely. So I'm going to go through some questions around how we can have that conversation. And actually even just acknowledging how that person might be feeling can sometimes be very powerful as well. I thought I'd focus on just one part of this because I thought depending on your screen size depends on how much you could see. And I just focused on that angry because I think that's the most polarizing emotion we can be feeling. You can see here let down, humiliated, bitter, aggressive, frustrated, distant. People feeling distant. The emotion behind that could be a level of angriness, and you can see even they're withdrawn. So those break down into a range of other emotions that might be sitting underneath that. So this is really just to show you the absolute broad range of emotions people can be feeling. And your job in conversations, depending on what type of conversations you're having, is really to understand, well, my boss is angry, but why is he angry? Is he actually feeling really let down because the team's not delivered? The anger isn't aggressive, it's through a place of being let down. Maybe he feels humiliated, maybe he feels disrespected. Maybe there's some other things going on behind that. I'm seeing anger, but there's other things behind that that's going on. Step 3, check yourself. I should probably say here self-awareness, but that's I wanted to play with that a little bit more. So really understanding yourself. And this is why we encourage people to be taking the predictive index and using it across their whole business. Because you need to understand your own preference and where you sit and what your natural communication style is. In the tool, we can have a look at the communication wheel. And this really focuses on, well, based on your profile, where do you sit? Are you a really high patience person? They're up the top. Versus low patience, they're more variety and hurried and fast pace. And you can see that they're likely to be more persuading or telling. If you're more calm, considered stable, you're going to be a little bit more connecting and respecting. And then we have a look at your A and B relationship. That's your dominance and extroversion. And if you're more task orientated, which is what we say when you're A over B, you're going to be more telling, more task. Let's talk about exactly what's happening. Let's be direct and get to the point. And if you're more people orientated, so higher extroversion than dominance, you'll be more persuading or connecting in style. I can share with you, if those of you who are interested, where you sit on this, but knowing your own profile, you can start to sort of self-map where you sit. I remember working on an executive team and all 7, 8 of us, we all sat very on the telling, either on the lines or in the telling quadrant. And I sat just slightly on the persuading, but we all sat on that lower half and definitely towards the telling style. And you can see their opinions will be loud and fast. It's about being assertive, to the point, and moving on quickly. You can imagine if we had a real connecting person in that team, they would have found that so overwhelming. They would have had to really flex to get their opinion out. And you almost couldn't be upset by anything that was said because everyone just wanted to generate ideas and let's move as fast as we can. And I'm going to tell you your idea is shit and we're going to move on. But it was very important that we were all very aware of that and how new people coming in might be feeling about that level of communication style. So I thought this is a really great visual to think about. Who am I dealing with? Based on what I'm seeing, are they a more persuasive person, or are they getting into that telling quadrant? Are they more connecting or respecting? What do you think their style is? The other thing that I think is really important to think about is your tone of voice. So when we think about that self-awareness, checking in about your own attitude and your own voice and your tone, your pace of how you're talking through things. Do you have a positive inflection in things? Do you have that perk in your voice? Are you feeling, very stern and very slow and considered and concise with very minimal inflection in your voice? Because tone of voice can really impact how other people perceive you in that moment, and may take their own views and judgment. This was really beautiful. I found this when I was doing some research, and it was talking about the placement of emphasis. What words do you inflect? And you can see the different examples, like, I didn't tell John you were late. Someone else told John you were late. I did not tell John you were late. Well, this didn't happen because I'm inflecting on the not. And you can see through the different variances how that changes the entire sentence. And that's the power of language, not just the English language, but a lot of different languages. I love this one. I did not tell John you were late. I was talking about somebody else. I mean, think about the range of how that can be interpreted. Now, the challenging thing for a lot of us at the moment is we're all working from home for the most part. I think everyone's working from home. And that means we're preferencing around emails more than probably we have been, because we're not in the office and having a bit of banter with people and having passing conversations. You can see that if I wrote, I did not tell John you were late, that there's 8 to 10 different ways that you could interpret that one sentence. And that to me is really powerful, that different people are going to interpret what you're writing differently, because there is no tone of voice. It becomes this very neutral sentence. You may have tone of voice in your head when you're writing it. The other thing I do not want you to do is put caps lock. Do not ever write in caps lock. I have heard of people doing this. We had a base camp call last week with some PR clients, and they talked about a manager who's been writing in caps lock recently as his shouting voice. Don't do that. So don't put words in bold because you're trying to put an inflection on them. I would encourage you to try and use more adjectives, use more descriptive words. Often we have to write longer pieces over email versus what we might say in a sentence or two. You might have to put a little bit more context when you're actually writing. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts? Oh, Peter's written a comment about, do you think there's significant variation based on cultural nuances? Absolutely. There is a lot can be interpreted, especially when even down to body language from different cultural perspectives and how things are interpreted, what are said and what are not said. And that's again where we've got to be quite aware of who we're dealing with and understanding how someone else might be interpreting based on their upbringing and cultural preference. So very good point to share. We then move into asking questions. So once we've really listened to that person, we understand where they're coming from, their perspective, we understand the emotional piece of it, that emotional intelligence. What do you think the feeling is behind that? How are they feeling? How are you feeling in that moment? What's your preference? Then we move into asking questions. And there's a real art behind asking powerful questions. And I've put a picture up here, which is actually about digging. I want you to dig deeper. Ask that question that can help you clarify what's really happening. Because often what you get told at a high level is not really what's being asked of you, or isn't really what's sitting underneath something. And you'd be surprised if you ask just that one extra question, you may get a whole depth of information given to you. So you've got a better understanding. We always use the very famous GROW model. So for those of you who haven't come across GROW, I would encourage you to do your research. It's by Sir John Whitmore. He wrote a book called Coaching for Performance. It's taught through MBAs. It's taught through a lot of business schools around the coaching model. And it gives you a really good foundation to understand exactly how to structure those questions and to have a bit of a flow behind it. And so we use the structure called GROW, which is goal. So that's where we start with the G. And you can see there's some questions here, and these are just some ideas for you. What seems to be the trouble? What do you make of? How do you feel about what concerns you? What seems to be the problem? What are the obstacles? What's holding you back? What do you think about doing X, Y, Z? Again, they're more exploring questions. Let me understand. And then we move into the reality. Let's get more information. Let's understand the situation as it stands. What do you mean by? Now that is a really powerful question. I've got a post-it note and I always say, and it literally just says meaning. And the other line underneath it says such as. So meaning helps us understand really the depth of something. What do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more. Or they've said something, you go, oh, such as, because that's prompting them to give you an example. And sometimes examples can be really powerful for you to understand whether it's a task or a project or even a situation. Tell me more about is a really powerful one. I learned that actually through Ronnie Altert, who's the CEO of Incentra. He always used to say is tell me more. And it was this really beautiful way to make you feel heard, and that he really always wanted to understand more, like tell me more about that. I always felt really good when he asked me that, and he used to then coach managers on saying, just tell me more, ask the customer, tell me more. And that's a really powerful one. If that's another question you want to put on a post-it note, stick on your desk, I'd encourage you to do that. Somebody's asking, what's the name of the book again? It's Sir John Whitmore, Coaching for Performance. There you go. What other ways did you try so far? So again, just that exploring piece can be really powerful. Then we move into the options. So outcome focused. This is really about moving forward. How do you want that project to turn out, or that piece of work? What does a really good outcome look like for you? Might be another exploring sales type question. What do you want? What do you desire as best outcome? What benefits would you like to get out of it? And again, if you're sitting with someone maybe trying to understand a project, that's a really powerful one. What do you propose? What is your plan? So again, understanding their perspective, and that could even be with them trying to resolve a conflict. You might be supporting them. What do you propose? What have you thought of so far? Again, just even simply, what options do you have? What have you thought through so far? And then we move into the final stage, which is about taking action. What will you do? What will I do? What I was thinking is I will do X, Y, Z. What are your thoughts on that? So really confirming the next steps. How will I know that it's happened? How will I know that it's been I've done a good job? And then the other ones is about risk. So this last bit is kind of extra depending on the situation, is why does it matter? How much does it matter? That's just validating whether we should pursue something. So there's a whole list of questions there, and we can share those with you after this, because that might be something you print out and you go, great, there's some questions I'm going to make sure we use. This was just a great diagram which talks to you about those open questions. You probably all heard about open questions and closed questions. Working with an open question, diagnosing the current state, moving into the impacts and exploring something, more controlling questions, and that's that reality options piece. And confirming is all about what's next. So again, you can see the GROW model in there and working through to an endpoint. But for those of you who are visual, because I know we've always got visual people, that might help you as well. And lastly, it's about providing clarity. So communication, you would have seen a whole lot of this presentation is about you getting clarity from the other person and you understanding and confirming and understanding. Because once you understand, you think things through, then you can move forward and you can put some process and some structure in place around how you communicate. And there's lots of different ways to then communicate moving forward. But I would encourage you to have structure, structure, structure. One of the first things, my first job after doing my HR studies was in a big corporate company. Now, I have really bad dyslexia. My writing has never been good. And I had a boss who actually used to sit with me and help me with it because it was just something I was just terrible at. And I never had a corporate job. And he's like, let me show you how to write a good email because your emails are absolutely atrocious. And he showed me the art of writing a really good email. And I want to share some of the ideas that he gave me. And this was like 10, 15 years ago, which I still use to this day and I find incredibly helpful. I, in my profile, have a very low formality. I hate structure. I hate process. But I found having some parameters, especially when I'm writing good emails or I'm writing content or I'm communicating anything, I use structure. You have no choice. The best way to communicate clearly is to have structure. I always think about the other person. Who am I communicating with and what is their preference? Now, for me, I know a lot of people's profiles when I'm dealing with people, but I'd like you to think about what do they need to know? What's important to them and what do they need out of this, whether it's an email, it's a proposal, it's a conversation. What do they need to do moving forward? It could be how you're having an effective one-on-one. What do they need? So thinking about the other person can really help you work out where to start. Be clear and specific. Now that seems like common sense, but who, what, when? I've got 2 whens in there. See, look how low attention to detail I have. And how. And structuring it potentially in that way, or even thinking to yourself, have I really covered off all my boxes here? Respond to all questions. Now this, I had another example of this happening this morning. I sent an email to someone. I said, there are 2 steps. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. They did step 1 and then replied and went, I've done it. And then I had to reply, I'm like, as per step 2, can you please do this? Now, it doesn't matter how well I communicate with that person didn't read the email to begin with. So I would encourage you from a communication perspective to read things from the beginning to the end. Don't read the first sentence of an email and then go reply. I'm going to just reply to that and just be so impatient that you don't even respond to everything that was asked of you. Often I go back and reread an email. What have they actually asked of me? Because number one, their email's all over the place. Maybe the conversation we had was all over the place. Sometimes it's your job to bring structure to that conversation and clarify what it is that they're asking of you and going through and rereading or asking more questions. Summarize and ask, have I missed anything? Does that, really going through and saying, based on what you've told me, this is what I think we need to do moving forward. This. Have I missed anything? Is there anything else you'd like to add? So again, getting that verbal confirmation that everything's been included. Using the GROW model for structure, that's actually one of the things that I sort of got taught early on, is the GROW model. And I used to do big company-wide emails and I still use GROW when I communicate. So the goal, what is the goal? What is the purpose of whatever is this email or written document is about? Even when I'm standing up and presenting, we start with the goal. What is the purpose? What is the higher intent of whatever it is we're dealing with? Then going into the reality. What's the current climate? What's the situation? What's in front of us? Then we go through options. So these are the options presented to us. This is what we're going to walk through, and then and this is what's going to happen next. So that's structure. Even though you're not going to write goal, options, goal, reality, options, will, it's a great structure. It's a way that our brains process information really nicely. And then lastly, that last piece, the will bit, is outlining the steps, allocating people, confirming dates. They're just some examples of all the things that you might include. I've got into a bit of a habit of just saying, actually saying action items, person, task, or this is what we're committing to. I put the date in bold. Find ways to make it so idiot-proof, and that's a term my husband uses all the time, is write something that's idiot-proof, that it cannot be lost in translation. that it's clear. If you go and read it, it just makes total sense. It's clear. You may not have all the background, and you can read that email and totally understand the current situation. The other thing I see people doing is not rereading what they're writing. So when we talk about written communication, they're not rereading. And think about it, even when you're running a meeting, it's going back and reconfirming at the end before you close a meeting that everything's been confirmed. And lastly, using diagrams and charts where possible. So if it makes sense, put it in a table, put it in a, make it nice and neat and easy to understand, format it nicely, make sure it's clean, neat, and easy. So there are 5 steps: mindful listening, emotional awareness, that's the emotional intelligence piece, understanding yourself, that piece of self-awareness. You're going to see that, almost hear it from me all the time, that level of self-awareness. The art of powerful questions, asking the right questions so you fully understand, and then walk through and provide clarity. And that clarity is how you verbally and from a written perspective communicate. So we are exactly on time. I would love to know if anybody has any questions. I'm pretty sure I've demuted or given everybody the option to demute themselves. So please feel free to ask any questions or comments. I know I've got a few of my clients on here who are more than welcome to, actually you're all welcome to say whatever you like. Any thoughts or comments from anybody? Any final questions?
Hey Alicia, it's Buffy. I just want to say I joined a bit late, so I'm sorry for that. But I did want to say fantastic presentation, because it's a real reminder of, often sometimes you do know some of these things, but putting them in practice, and it's the preparation and thinking through what you're going to do and how you're going to approach the conversations is a really helpful reminder. And I think there's just something else that I think I found quite helpful, particularly at this point in time, where we're in a world where people's everyday lives have been turned upside down, is kind of reflecting back a little bit with people. What if you're not able to dig deeper, or if they're not, there's that kind of reticence to help people, or maybe it can be a good way to start to enable people to dig a bit deeper and share a bit more, to get under the skin of things with people. Sometimes reflecting back is quite helpful, because sometimes what people are saying to me, I'm fine, and you're looking at them and they really don't look fine.
And sometimes I will even say to people, and that's a bit of a confidence thing, but I'll say to people, I can hear you saying you're fine, but I can see by the way that you're looking at me and by the way that you're sitting, I don't feel like everything's okay.
100%, Alicia. I think it's because people are used to saying I'm fine because they don't think the other person actually really wants to listen to what their problem is. So they say they're fine. But I think if you really do that extra questioning and say, no, really, I can see that you're not. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. I've got plenty of time to listen to you. I think that sort of opens the door and invites the conversation a little more.
Absolutely. And having the courage to ask that. And I think you're right. It's letting people know you actually do want to know. I'm not just asking to be polite. I genuinely do want to know. Really great insight. Thank you, Olga, and thank you, Buffy. Anybody else? Final thoughts, comments?
Just wanted to reiterate, Alicia, that was so insightful and so timely, given that we're going through so much change in corporations and we need to know how to speak to people. It was only yesterday that one of our close friends, associates, friends, had to tell 200 people that they had to be stood down. So this is just invaluable. Yeah, really loved it.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I think that's, from my perspective, we're seeing a lot of internal conflict coming up because a lot of us are now, number one, we're all put under a lot of stress. I think there's not anybody out there that's not feeling stress and anxiety right now. I mean, you'd be living in a hole if you weren't feeling some level of stress and anxiety. Now we're turning up to work. We're actually not even turning up to work. We're turning up to our homes to work. We've probably got kids. We've got disruption. We've got partners at home. Our jobs have probably changed in some way. There's so much change happening. It's so quick to default into really negative communication patterns and to be direct and cruel and not listen and not understand. So I totally agree, which is why I wanted to do this session. this is all getting recorded, so you're more than welcome. You'll get a link afterwards to the recording if you want to share it with any people in your business. It's obviously free content to be used. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you for attending. It was great to have such a nice big group today. Feel free to email me. You all have my email and you all have my phone number. So feel free to email or ring me if you've got any questions. You want to go a little bit deeper from a one-on-one perspective. I'm here to support anybody. So thank you, everybody. And I wish you all the best and a happy day.
Thanks, Alicia.
Bye.
Bye.